Number 5 on this list is war. So this one's pretty general, but the Bible definitely touched on it quite a bit, so it feels fair to include it. Now, war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even until death." Whew! What a mouthful, guys, but that is just one passage discussing war, but frankly, there are just so many of them. Sometimes they talk about specific wars being fought between certain groups, but a lot of the time it's just war in general. Sometimes it even discusses how God will be with you when you go to war, which is actually kind of an incentive to fight. This book and what it preaches has been the catalyst for so many battles in human history, and it's not unreasonable to think that it's going to happen again. I certainly hope that there is no more major wars in human history, and this predict isn't right, but I'm not going to be holding my breath. Number 4 on this list is the 7 bowls. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, "Go and pour out onto earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God." So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, "Just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments." That's a passage from the Bible, and those are only 3 of the bowls. There are literally 4 more of these things that get even worse. The 4th one causes the sun to burn people. The 5th one covers the world in darkness and has people bite their tongues off. The 6th one dries up a massive river, and the 7th one causes huge earthquakes. So not really the best of times if you ask me. Now let's be real, folks. Are all of these things going to happen all at once? Probably not. But some of it definitely could. Is there a reality where I see all of the fish in the oceans getting poisoned by something and then ultimately destroying the worldwide ecosystem? Potentially. Could I see a massive earthquake ravaging parts of the world and causing a horrible chain reaction killing millions? Yeah, I mean, it could happen. All of these bowls are pretty horrible, and we just have to hope that none of these things happen to us now, because the ramifications, they'd be pretty catastrophic. Number 3 on this list is the persecution of Christians. Religion, although it can do great good, has also caused horrible evil. Throughout history, we can see that religion is basically the leading cause for humans to start fighting each other. What someone believes and the rules to which they govern their life is really important to us humans, and Christianity is no different. The Bible has talked a bunch about the persecution of Christians before. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. That's just one of the passages in the Bible talking about it, but we also have some other ones that are just straight to the point, reading, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." Now, Christians being persecuted is nothing new. This is a prediction that's actually already come to fruition many times over. Like I said before, religion has started many wars in the past, and the persecution of Christians has certainly been a reason for a couple of them. It's possible that this isn't actually done though. I'd like to believe that the world is getting to a place where one can believe what they choose to believe, and that's fine for them, but the fact of the matter is we just simply aren't there yet. There has always been and continues to be the persecution of not just Christians, but tons of groups groups with all different beliefs. It's sad to say, but this might not be over yet, and this prediction may continue to be proven correct. Number 2 on this list is famine. For probably most of the people watching this video, famine, or the thought of going hungry, most likely isn't that close to you. However, there are still millions of people in the world that suffer greatly from famine and die from it all the time. There will be great earthquakes and in various places famine and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Famine is mentioned a lot in the Bible, and I think it was probably a sign of the times. We have to remember that when the Bible was written, the world was not nearly as advanced as it is today. Food and water, basic resources for survival, were not a given by any means, but something that people had to fight for on the daily. If you had these resources in abundance, then that was considered a luxury and you were probably really wealthy. Even though we don't live in those times anymore, and now for a lot of people, water is at your nearest tap and food at your nearest supermarket, famine is still a real thing. It should also be noted that we should never take food for granted. Some experts are predicting that if global warming continues at the drastic rate that it's going, food will become far harder to grow and get a lot scarcer. Fingers crossed we can prevent this from happening and keep everybody well fed in the future. And finally, number 1 on this list is an asteroid. Listen to this passage from the Bible and tell me this isn't just a tad bit concerning. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And 1/3 of the earth was burned up, and 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood. 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So I don't know about you guys, but the prospect of getting hit with 3 separate asteroids really doesn't sound like a great time to me. The way that they describe it may be a bit tame too, to be honest. If we're gonna get hit with 3 separate things from space, then it's very likely that more than 1/3 of the trees are gonna burn up. In fact, it would probably be the end of the world as we know it. I've done a lot of research on the possibility of an asteroid coming and crashing into the Earth, and it's a real concern. Luckily, scientists don't predict anything in the near future, but that doesn't mean that it still won't happen. In fact, statistically speaking, eventually it will happen. Whether we're ready for this impact or are capable of defending ourselves from it, that's another question entirely.
Number 5, the Queen and the royal family.
Golden thread running through the generations. That's how one of Queen Elizabeth II's many prime ministers described her reign, the longest in British history.
One of the most concerningly accurate predictions our boy Michelle predicted was that in 2022, Queen Elizabeth would pass and her son would take her place, but abdicate his position. In his original writings in 1555, Nostradamus wrote, "At the end of the war, the great powers change. Near the shore, 3 beautiful children are born, ruin to the people when they are of age, to change the country's kingdom and see it grow no more. The children are Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip's grandchildren, Prince William, Henry, and Princess Beatrice." The conflict could refer to the 1982 Malvinas War between the UK. Princess Diana gave birth to William 7 days after the war ended. Could Nostradamus be claiming that the end of Queen Elizabeth could be the end of the monarchy? Well, another writing of his adds to that. Check this out. Because they disapproved of his divorce, a man who later they considered unworthy, the people will force out the king of the islands, and a man will replace him who never expected to be king. Now, if you're like me and you struggle a bit to decipher centuries-old riddles, there are experts like Mario Reading, a British author, to do it for us. Reading explains the thinking, writing that after the Queen's death, Prince Charles will be crowned and become king of the islands. That part's already happened. However, a certain proportion of the British population, following his divorce from Diana, still persists that the pressure on him is so great and his age so much against him that Charles will agree to abdicate in favor of his elder son, Prince William. So it sounds like before he was even born, Nostradamus could sense that no one wanted King Charles. That obvious, huh? Hey, here's a prediction from me. By the end of this video, you'll subscribe to Top 5 Scary for scary videos every day and the best host in the game. I got a strong feeling I'm right. Here's an ominous one for you.
Humans, it says, are without doubt responsible for global warming and will pay an ever-increasing price. That includes more of what we've already seen this year: parched fields, forests on fire, and deadly heat.
Like the sun, the head shall sear the shining sea. The Black Sea's living fish shall all the boil. When Rhodes and Genoa half-starved shall be, the local folk to cut them up shall toil. Well, thankfully, we're not quite at the point of literal boiling fish in the sea, but that's not to say we're not rapidly approaching that reality. It's easy to interpret like the sun, the head shall sear the shining sea, as a warning for the increasing rise in temperatures we've seen across the globe this year. 2022 has already been a record-breaking year for climate change, and not in a way that's particularly good for anybody. July of 2022 was one of the hottest months globally, among the top 10 hottest in global history. But it's fine, I'm sure we just need to walk to work a little bit more, use paper straws, and we'll really get a handle on this thing. The death of coral reefs, eradication of natural habitats, and the worrisome decline in fish populations worldwide could all point to Nostradamus being right about this one, predicting boiling fish and the common folk starving. Not trying to scare you too much, but some experts predict that if we keep going at the rate we're at, the world's oceans could be totally empty of all fish by 2048. For my own sake, I sincerely hope Nostradamus is wrong about us in this one, because if I'm ever at a pub and I can't get a clam chowder or fish and chips, I just don't know that any of this will be worth it anymore. Number 3. Man, did this guy only ever predict depressing stuff? Could he not have just predicted just once that maybe it would be beautiful weather year round, the Leafs would have a good season, and the McRib would come back? No, sadly it was mostly doom prophecies. Check this one out. No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred, his fellow man to eat in despair. International political instability, the pandemic, and Brexit have all contributed pretty nefariously to inflation. And let me tell you, as a guy who struggles to balance his checkbook, it has been a nightmare finding cheap honey. I'm serious, go on Amazon right now. Google raw honey and candle wax. Of all the things for a sage to be completely accurate on, I wasn't expecting it to be the economics of honey and wax, but hey, it's real. This is a personal issue I'm gonna have to set aside for now. But one has to wonder too with the phrase, his fellow man to eat in despair. Did Nostradamus have some insight into the popularity of the Eat the Rich movement? Well, that's always been a popular thing to spray paint over a bank wall or write on a poster board to take to a protest. After the pandemic, that sentiment has been more pronounced than ever in recent years, with large swaths of the population rightfully being upset about wage and income disparity that exists. It's hard enough for the common man to make a living out there, let alone being able to afford good, reliable honey. And if you know a supplier for that, drop a link please. My DMs are always open to talk honey. Number 2. If you asked me 5 years ago to predict what the future of finances would look like, I don't think I ever would have guessed the rise of NFTs or cryptocurrency. I mean, I don't think anyone could have estimated that we'd ever have an economy based around trading pictures of bored apes wearing sailor hats. Well, except of course Nostradamus could have predicted it, because he predicts everything. Could the French seer have predicted cryptocurrency? Take a quick listen to this. The copies of gold and silver inflated, which after the theft were thrown into the lake, at the discovery that all is exhausted and dissipated by the debt, all scripts and bonds will be wiped out. Recently, gold has been surging, and a whole wave and movement was born around moving towards cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, as a new infallible gold standard. Waves of Silicon Valley engineers and executives have left their high-level positions to pursue cryptocurrency startups, and the push to try and decentralize currency and move towards cryptocurrency has been very real in recent years, and growing more and more. Could we really move away from physical cash altogether? Especially after the pandemic, we've seen more and more businesses and operations move towards cashless transactions altogether, moving towards all of our money being stored digitally, which stresses me out a lot because I have a hard time enough managing money when it's in front of me, let alone when it's imaginary. Maybe it's a lot to ask that Nostradamus could have predicted so much the idea of digital currency, but there's a lot to think about as ideas of a new form of currency taking shape. I've got to say though, if he really was as much of a prophet as they say he was, he would have invested in Bitcoin early, started seeing those real profits. Number 1. Keeping on his predictions about the technology of the future, could Nostradamus have predicted the rise of AI and the looming threat of a technological takeover? Honestly, more likely than you think. Feast your ear holes on this little stanza. The moon in the full of night over the high mountain, the new sage with a lone brain sees it, by his disciples invited to be immortal. Eyes to the south, hands in bosoms, bodies in the fire. Now, this does sound a little bit like something a wizard in a cave might whisper you over a crystal ball before sending you on a journey, but bear with it. Some experts firmly believe that this could be an allusion to the rise of the digital era. The new sage with a lone brain sees it by his disciples invited to be immortal. I don't want to stroke his ego too much by referring to them as sages, but Mark Zuckerberg has made it incredibly clear that he believes the future of the world and humanity as a whole is going to be virtual in his quest to create the metaverse, creating a world world where literally the body will be left behind. Bodies in the fire, invited to be immortal. Do you think we could get to an era where we start living like we're in the Matrix, uploading our consciousness to a digital realm? What was once pure fantasy is encroaching on our reality closer and closer with each passing day, and I honestly think it'll be sooner than we're expecting before we're all living in that digital world.
Number 5 on this list is better than human robots. Humans are far from perfect. I think we can all agree on that. But up to this point, there hasn't been a single other species as intelligent or capable as humans have been. That's why we have effectively taken over the whole planet and have become the dominant species. We may not stay dominant for much longer if robots can become better than us though. Best Life says, a more immediate concern that will only be exacerbated in the decades to come is the phasing out of jobs and entire industries as artificial intelligence makes them obsolete. If we do not act promptly in anticipation of job disruption, we could experience a social catastrophe on a scale not seen since the Great Depression, predict Rohit Talwar, Steve Wells, and Alexandra Whittington, leaders of Fast Future, a professional foresight firm. Governments could be caught out by the pace and scale of automation through robotics and AI to such an extent that a sudden surge in unemployment leaves significant numbers of people without work and without the funds to provide for their families. They predict that such a situation would lead to all sorts of collateral issues such as increasing social unrest, tension related to the income inequality, a rise in criminal behavior in order to meet basic needs, and potentially violent backlash against government leaders and authorities. Robots don't need to come in with futuristic weapons and kill us all to do some serious damage to humanity. Just by letting us further develop them and then implement them instead of human workers, that's gonna do enough damage. I've read extensively on this topic before, and it is literally already happening right now. People are losing their jobs left, right, and center because robots are just simply cheaper and more efficient. Sooner rather than later, there are gonna be too many people unemployed by this, and the whole thing is gonna come crashing down. We've just gotta hope that by that time, the robots aren't smart enough to take over either. Number 4 on this list is rigged elections. Now this is something that's been going on for time, but don't expect it to leave us anytime soon. Best Life says, as technology has made voting easier in some parts of the world, it's also made voting systems more vulnerable to attack, and these threats are only likely to grow, as we've seen in the efforts from Russians in the United States to most recent elections. Hacking an election in terms of changing actual votes is extremely risky for a nation state to do against the US, as it could lead to war, but for hacktivists and some organized crime groups, the risk may be worth it, says Jason Glassberg, co-founder of Casabah Security, a hacking firm that does extensive research and testing for the Internet of Things. At a minimum, expect to see ransomware and other cyber extortion targeting voting systems in the coming years. However, more dramatic attacks such as permanently crippling voting machines or forcing the machines to retabulate votes are also realistic. So it seems that rigged elections are only evolving and becoming trickier to detect, not leaving us behind like some would hope. We have this perception that our system is set in place and it's totally fair and democratic, but this just goes to show how off that perception is. So many factors that we don't know about go into an election, and our tiny little vote might not play that big of a role if some voting machine is casting millions for one candidate. It's all very slimy and sadly the reality of the world. Number 3 on this list is Hijacked Cities. So we don't live in Gotham and there's no evil Joker character coming to take over our town, so how would somebody hijack an entire city? Well, Best Life says, the dark side of our technological advancements is that we are also more vulnerable to attack. Glassberg points out to the recent ransomware attack on Atlanta that froze the city's systems, which eventually cost it $2.6 million for emergency response. We can expect to see more attacks like this in the coming years, particularly as city and county governments run a number of critical services which are often insecure and increasingly connected to the internet, says Glassberg. Since it's proven difficult to stop and prosecute these attacks, especially when they use simple tactics like ransomware, this is a very realistic scenario in the coming years as more criminal groups groups will hijack public services in order to demand large ransoms. Having all our cities run through tech has made our cities very advanced, but it's also made them very exploitable. The Atlanta example proves that some guy with a supercomputer across the world could completely bring the city to its knees. The government has even included this idea in warfare and has full-on task forces designed to target tech and things of this nature. Expect a lot more attacks like this moving forward as our tech continues to develop. Number 2 on this list is digital Big Brother. I am a big fan of the show Big Brother, one of my favorite reality TV shows actually. Would I love to participate on that show? Absolutely I would. Do I want to be monitored every second of my life though? Absolutely not. Best Life says, as AI becomes increasingly sophisticated, we will inevitably start to see applications in the security domain developed without further programming by humans, according to the Fast Future team. Whilst not quite to the level of Skynet at the heart of the Terminator movie franchise, the machines promise to be far more sophisticated in their approach than humans and to develop more complex algorithms they predict. Consequently, such developments will severely challenge our ability to understand, monitor, intervene, make changes, and exert control over our digital security bots. They expect that the surveillance and control these bots will have over our lives could increasingly infringe on our freedoms, giving a sense that robot overlords are watching us. I already feel like a robot overlord is watching me. Like anytime I say something that rhymes with Alexa and then my Alexa robot turns on, I realize that I'm being listened to all the time. Or when I mention one thing in passing to a friend, like, I don't know, I say that I really want to go golfing sometime soon, and then the next thing that I see on my Instagram account is ads for golfing. This Big Brother mentality is already happening right now, and it really isn't nice. Apparently, this is only going to become more and more invasive as time goes on. We won't be able to go to the bathroom anymore without some robot knowing about it and storing that information somewhere. And finally, number 1 on this list is extinct species. This one is truly very sad, and it's something that has been going on for decades. Global warming is a disaster. It is a man-caused disaster that is slowly eating the world, and it's gaining speed. The ice caps are melting at unprecedented rates, and before we know it, they will be completely destroyed. Not only will that destroy the habitats of tons of creatures that live by the ice, but it will also destroy the habitats of creatures in the ocean and destroy our cities because the ocean level will rise enough to flood them. The next 50 years is absolutely critical when it comes to climate change, and many experts think that we've already passed the place of no return. It's currently estimated that 1 million species will go extinct by 2050, and there literally isn't anything that we can do about it at this point. Reversing the effects of climate change takes time, and what we do now, we will see those results in 50 years. That number of 1 million species will only continue to rise and rise if change isn't actively enforced, and honestly guys, we might be part of that 1 million species. Number 5 on this list is the continued damaging effects of climate change. That's right guys, we're going there. In 2021, temperatures in North America had some record-setting numbers. Over the last few years, temperatures have been rising significantly, and 2021 was no different. The west coast of Canada and the United States were the hottest that they've ever been this past year in 2021, and we saw what rising temperatures can cause. Forest fires raged in British Columbia and in California, and with the temperatures continuing to rise, this will only get worse and worse. Something concerning as well is that the nighttime temperature was hotter than it's ever been. Typically, it's very hot in the day and then gets pretty cool in the nighttime. This allows our bodies to cool off when we sleep. However, in 2021, the temperature during the night didn't drop nearly as drastically as it usually does, and this is because the Earth is holding on to that heat in the atmosphere and it's having a hard time escaping. With all of this being said, and the fact that no real dramatic change has been made to our greenhouse gas emissions, scientists predict that this trend will continue in 2022. They've come out and said that between 2021 and 2025, there is a 90% chance that we will have the warmest global year ever. They also predict that there is a 40% chance that in that same time frame, we will reach 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than what our global temperature was at pre-industrial days. All of this heat also means that they're predicting a lot more tropical storms as well. The frequency of cyclones in the Atlantic area is supposed to rise. Forest fires, as I mentioned earlier, will continue to rage and be harder to suppress, and southwestern North America is likely to be a lot drier than it's ever been. Basically, scientists believe that 2022 will continue to break climate change records and be pretty detrimental to the Earth. Number 4 on this list is a prediction from Baba Vanga. This one is pretty bloody triggering, and I can only hope that she's wrong about it. Baba Vanga thinks that in 2022 there will be a deadly virus that is released from a glacier and that will ravage the world. Now, if you don't know who Baba Vanga is, then she was a woman who lost her eyes at a very young age, but then developed the ability to have visions. She's also made a lot of correct predictions over the years, with people saying that she has an 85% success rate. Brexit, the Syrian gas attacks, the first United States black president, all of this stuff was predicted by Baba Vanga. In 2022, she is saying that a glacier will melt due to global warming, and that in that ice will be a virus that will get released into the world, and our human immune systems won't be ready for it. After COVID, I cannot handle any more viruses or diseases or anything like that at all. The sad thing is though, that this could very well actually happen. We already spoke about global warming and how it is continuing to rise, with 2022 having the potential to be the hottest year ever. This is obviously causing the glaciers on the poles to melt. Now, the whole aspect of having a virus released because of this kind of sounds like it was taken straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's actually accurate. Scientists have found viruses in the ice before, and after testing them, have realized that they are nothing like what we've ever seen. Therefore, our bodies would not be capable of fending off these viruses because they have never encountered anything that's similar to them. Some of these viruses may not even affect humans either, but they could affect animals or plants. This could be just as detrimental though, as it has the potential to absolutely annihilate the ecosystem. Either way guys, we just have to cross our fingers and hope that any viruses found in the ice aren't too dangerous, and we just dodge this bullet altogether. Number 3 on this list is another catastrophic economic recession. Yep guys, it's time to talk money, or well, I guess in this instance it would be the lack of money. After the massive economic recession that took place a little over a decade ago, everyone is still on high alert, doing their best to make certain that we don't fall into that trap ever again. This is easier said than done though, because there are often extenuating circumstances that are out of our control. For instance, COVID, that really hurt the economy and nobody saw that coming. Stuff like that is kind of impossible to predict. However, that doesn't stop people from trying to look ahead and see what the next economic year will hold for us. Right now, a positive economic recovery is seen as very likely due to many people believing that 2022 is supposed to be the first normal year back after the pandemic. People will have savings that they want to spend, they go out, they spend them, bang, the economy loves it. But experts believe that this level of economic optimism has reached an unstable place. The stock market is predicting such a big boom, and the experts don't think that the money will actually hold up to what they're predicting. It should also be noted that the percentage chance of an economic recession has been slowly rising over the last few months. Right now, it's believed that in July of next year, there will be just under a 10% chance that the entire United States economy goes into a major recession. A 1 in 10 chance, it's not horrible, but when you're playing with people's life savings and their jobs, that gets a lot scarier very quickly. Economic optimism can be a good thing, but overconfidence can bring us to a very scary place, as seen by the housing market collapse of 2007. Number 2 on this list is a prediction by Nostradamus. Now, would this really be a 2022 predictions list video if we didn't have Nostradamus in it? He's basically a staple whenever it comes to scary predictions. This time, he believes that a major climate war will start in 2022. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nostradamus, he was a French astrologer and seer in the 1500s. Now, we still talk about him today though, due to his major work called The Prophecies. The Prophecies is a collection of poetic quatrains that predict things to come in the world. Nostradamus has been proved correct with some of his prophecies, such as the death of Henry II, the Great Fire of London, and the French Revolution. We actually talked a little bit about Nostradamus in a previous video looking at the top 5 mysterious people who tried to warn us about the apocalypse. In 2021, Nostradamus believed that zombies would take over the world. Pretty outlandish if you ask me, but the one that we're talking about today is a little bit more reasonable in my opinion. Nostradamus says, Under the opposite Babylonian climate, great will be without the outpouring. As we've already spoken about, climate change will be greatly affecting our world. Could it be possible that a country has a shortage of resources due to this climate change and has to go to war? Potentially a lack of clean drinking water could cause some type of chaos between two nations? Maybe the world enacts new climate change laws that one country refuses to follow and therefore goes to war with some other nations. I'm not sure what it's gonna be, but all of these things, they could have potential. The one thing about Nostradamus is that he was never very specific with his predictions and often left it up for interpretation. But I do think that a war involving something climate-based is certainly a possibility and would be particularly horrible because war could only ever hurt the climate even more. Number 1 on this list is another prediction from Baba Vanga about a dragon taking over the world. That's right, folks, clearly Baba Vanga was a very busy lady while she was alive and had multiple predictions for the year 2022. In this one, she believes that a dragon will take over the entire planet. In fact, she is quoted as saying, "A strong dragon will seize humanity. The 3 giants will unite. Some people will have red money. I see numbers 100, 5, and many zeros." So we have a lot going on here. We have dragons, giants, money that is red, and some strange numbers that kinda came out of nowhere. If we take what Baba Vanga said literally, then I can almost guarantee you that it won't come true. In my entire living life, I have never seen a dragon before, and as much as I would love to believe that they're real, I think it's safe to say that one is not going to appear next year and ravage the planet. That being said though, if we break down what she said a little bit more, then there could be some serious truth in what she's saying. Specialists of Baba Vanga believe that when she is referring to a dragon, she's actually talking about China. The giants that she's referring to, interpreters believe, are the 3 biggest countries in Asia: China, Russia, and India. Therefore, they will unite as a force, and the dragon, China, will take over the world. The money being read could be in reference to yuan, and the denominations of 100 or 5 could be referring to some important monetary number of those yuan that hasn't been made clear to us at this point. Now, if we take her meaning as I just described it, it actually doesn't sound nearly as outlandish as it did when we were talking about dragons. However, this would be pretty freaking bad because I can only imagine that the giants uniting and the dragon taking over the world would mean a massive all-out war. If China, India, and Russia are involved, that also means that the use of nuclear weapons would probably take place, in which case 2022, it's really going to be a lousy year, guys.